Namaste and a warm welcome to all the participants and to our speaker today, Achal Mehra ji. Ritambra Wellness is into a month-long celebration of yoga, and with today's program will be the last, titled Ashtanga, the limbs of yoga by Mr. Achal Mehra. Before we introduce our speaker and hand over to Achal ji, a little information for those who were not here earlier and have joined us today. Ritambra Wellness is a collective of like-minded individuals that look at wellness in a holistic way, not just the body, but the mind as well. And all through the practice and knowledge and wisdom that comes from our ancient Indian scriptures and heritage. We conduct corporate programs and retreats for wellness that look at personal transformation, and the details are available on our website, rutambrawellness.com. We also conduct webinars regularly, and our earlier talks are uploaded on YouTube under Rutambra Wellness. If you'd like to be part of our community, please post your contact details, cell number, email ID so we can add you to our groups. In today's session, we have the talk for 45 minutes, followed by a question and answer. Feel free to post your questions on the chat function, and Achalji will answer any questions after his talk. So let's get on with today's session and learn about Ashtanga, the limbs of yoga. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce Achal Mehra ji to you. He's an expert in Hatha Vinyasa and has been practicing yoga for over 30 years, an engineer, an MBA from IIMA. He worked in senior management positions with Pepsi, Sony, and GE, and was CEO of AXN in South Asia. His practice and teachings focus on breathing, awareness, acceptance, and own body intelligence techniques to deepen the postures and experience meditation through them. At Rutambra, as part of our faculty, he contributes to the physical, emotional, and the spiritual wellness of the community. So over to you, Achalji.
Thank you very much, Veena ji, for that introduction. I'm really happy to be here to be with this group of like-minded individuals who are looking at their own lives in a way to be able to improve it, to live it to its full potential. And I think yoga becomes one of the ways to, or one of the tools to help people to achieve their true potential. So in my personal journey, from an engineer to an MBA and then in the corporate career, I guess, there was a time when I was looking at how could I, live my life to a, more full potential. How can I be more happy? How can I, be more healthy? And in that quest for wellness, in that quest for, searching the answers within, my journey with yoga began. My journey with yoga initially was through the asanas only. When I was a kid, I just learned the asanas without understanding the entire dimension of what yoga is all about. So it's not at all about the physical exercises. What it is currently associated with, I think yoga has a much deeper meaning and connotation to it, and that's what we are going to explore in today's discussion. So yoga, the yoga word means union, and I think the biggest understanding in Hindu scriptures and our ancient scriptures is that there is the self and the universal self. There is no separation between the two. I mean, I consider myself as a separate human being, but we are still a part of the same energy that is around us. And yoga means understanding that very fact, so that you become a part. There is a union. You become a part of that same energy, and then you are able to appreciate life in a universal, as a universal consciousness. And that's the whole journey of yoga. And it starts, so there are 8 limbs of yoga codified by Patanjali. Patanjali was a great sage. He lived somewhere around 300 BC. And yoga has been an ancient practice. So even in Harappan times, you could see the yogi seals and all that stuff. So yoga has been an eternal practice, one can say, as long as humankind and Hindu history has existed. It has been there in existence for a very long time. And but Patanjali was the first person who really codified yoga, in the sense that he said that yoga is a set of principles. There are 195 principles or 195 sutras in his book, the Yoga Sutra, which says that if you do it like 2 plus 2 is equal to 4, if you follow this path, then you will reach the path of enlightenment, or you will reach the goal of enlightenment and samadhi within. So yoga starts, at there are 8 limbs of yoga. I will first name them. So first limb is called Yam, say, which is like, the your relationship with the society. I'll, talk more about it. Then Niyam. After Yam and Niyam, these principles are, understood and absorbed. Then you come to Asana. After Asana, then there is Pranayam, which is a breath work, understanding the breath. And then there is Pratyahar, which is conversion. So the first 4 limbs are what is called the Bahirang Yoga, or the outside yoga, the external yoga. So yeah, we were talking about these the Yam, Niyam, Asan, and Pranayam. These are called Bahirang Yoga. They are external to us. And then Pratyahar, which is like a conversion or looking within or returning to the source. And then there are the last 3 limbs are called Dharana, Dhyan, and Samadhi. So we will now go into each one of them and say how our journey into yoga becomes and how it ends into Samadhi. So the first principle which Patanjali laid out was Yam, restraint, which somehow defined how we relate with the society. And the basic understanding was that if our relationship with the society is complex, if it is not solved, if it is not free and liberated, then the journey within will not be started. We cannot start our journey within. So that was with that. Patanjali laid out 5 niyams, 5 yams, which are Satya, Ahimsa, Asteya, Brahmacharya, and Aparigraha. So we start with the first one is Ahimsa. It is non-violence. So it's not only a negative principle that if I don't do non-violence, violence physically, it has a much deeper connotation to it. Even violence can happen in emotions. Violence can happen in thought. Violence can happen in intent, and violence can actually happen in action. So sometimes we refer to violence and we think only of either somebody has beaten someone or somebody is shouting at someone. That's violence. But violence has Hinsa has a much deeper meaning to it, in the sense that even if you have an intent to hurt someone, or even if you have a thought to hurt someone, that also is Hinsa. So once you have understood Hinsa, then you would also understand what Ahimsa is, the opposite of it. When you are so much in love with everything around that you do have no, violent thought, emotion, or action inside or outside you, then that is what is called Ahimsa. That is the first principle of Yam, or first dimension of Yam. Another restraint he talked about, that's how we relate with the society. So the next thing he talked about was what? Satya. I mean, if we relate with people around us, if we lie to them, then there is a complex relationship which is formed, and that untruth or that lie creates a web of problems for us, and somehow we are not free inside. So the second principle was of Yam was Satya. And then we come to the third one. Third one was Aste. Aste means not stealing from others. Fourth one was Brahmacharya. And now Brahmacharya, many people, think of it as sexual restraint, but Brahmacharya has a deeper meaning to it. Some people have, described it as jiska acharan Brahma jaisa ho. Yani, somebody whose work or whose life is like Brahm, or like is divine. That is what is called Brahmacharya. So the understanding was that if a person is really evolving, then the sexual restraint was a byproduct of it, and it's not a negative principle that you have to follow. The last one is aparigraha, which is also called non-covetousness. So not coveting other things, being non-greedy about things. So this is how the Yam cannot exist in isolation. It exists always in relation to society, and that's where our journey into yoga begins. If we are, stuck with the society through all these, things, then we would not be able to begin our internal journey in a positive manner. So that is what is called, those are the principles of Yam. That was the first limb. Once you have understood the niyam, then you come to a little deeper inside into what we call niyam. Niyam are the personal principles that you need to follow. It starts with, there are 5 again, which were listed by Patanjali. First one was Shauch. Shauch means purity. Again, purity not only in terms of, just having a bath and feeling pure about it, but, through the senses, whatever you take inwards, being able to have purity in all of that. So it included food, it included the kind of things you listen to, it, any sense objects that, come inside that you utilize inwards. They, if there is purity in them, then you are observing the principles of Shaucha. Also, the second, dimension to it is, of course, the physical bath. And then the third dimension to it is the mind, the purity of the mind. So that is what was meant by Shauch. Then the next principle, Patanjali talked about was Santosh. Again, Santosh means contentment. And again, not in a negative manner. In a negative manner, it would mean that, you say, oh, what is the need to have that? Because you cannot possess so many other things and you say, okay, oh, those things are worthless. No, having an understanding in terms of, what life is offering us, and that offering to us is meant for us, is meaningful, and I don't want anything else. And that's why I'm contented with it. It's not that, and that's why I have no sense of envy or jealousy with any other thing. That is what is contentment. Again, as I mentioned, it has a positive connotation to it rather than a negative connotation to it. The third principle that in the personal principles, or what we call niyam, that Patanjali talked about was tap. And tap means, in some ways, it means austerity. Again, many people, describe it as, or, define it as, living a life of not having any possessions, not having, any material belongings and things like that. But it was not meant like that. What tap meant, that it meant a simple life. And a simple life means a non-attached life to things, to material things, to, things around you. And so that's what was the meaning of tap. Then another principle he talked about was Swadhyay. And again, there is a little bit of a confusion about it. When we talk about Swadhyay, many, analysts, think about study of scriptures with that. But it was not the study of scriptures. It was the study of the self itself. So, if you are sitting and then you are observing, your thoughts and understanding how you are responding to people around you, that's an observation. And, sometimes, for example, I would say that when you are angry, and instead of reacting, if you start just observing it, that how there is an input, and then because of that input, there is an output, which is anger. And if you are just a watchful witness to the entire process, maybe, the anger itself will evaporate and transform into a different feeling. So that was the meaning of Swadhyay. And he talked about, the last principle he talked about was Ishwar Pranidhan, which means surrendering to a larger force than yourself. And with that, what happens, you kind of drop your ego to a certain extent, which is also very important in your journey to evolve in the practice of yoga itself. So these two were the first two, layers of yoga, or first two limbs of yoga. Because if you understood these, if you practiced these a little, not as a, practice, but as an understanding, then you were ready to move a little deeper into the other limbs of yoga. Again, Patanjali called it limbs of yoga, and not, he did not think of it as a sequential thing, that, first you need to do yam, then niyam, and then asan. No, it was not meant like that. It was a holistic thing. Once you start growing in one, you start growing in the other as well. So but these were the 8 parts in which have to be understood. So after the yam and niyam, then comes what yoga is most popularly known as the third limb of yoga, which is asana. And the entire world, think of yoga as an asana practice. But asana, if you again in your journey from evolving from a human being to a state of samadhi, which is complete annihilation of your yoga, of your ego, asana is just a, it's like, how you fine tune an instrument, uh, and then you are able to play good music with that. So the purpose is not to, be able to stand on your head or on your hand, or be a, gymnast with it. The whole idea is to have a healthy body, which has a very, very healthy flow of energy in it. And with that, your body and mind are related. So your mind is also becoming purer. And then you are really uh, a little more ready to, jump beyond what's called the layer of the physical body itself. So that was the third limb. Again, many people just think of it as a physical exercise, but as I mentioned to you, yoga has not only the asana practice is not only a physical exercise, it also has a mental dimension to it. It also has a spiritual dimension to it. It also has an emotional dimension to it. So as you start to grow into the practice, you will observe that sometimes your mental faculties are improving because your body has just become a little more healthy. You're able to deal with your emotions a little better, and that will happen in relation with others, when you're dealing with people. So you would be able to handle your relationships a little better, the emotions in it a little better. And finally, also a spiritual understanding. We all understand and that we live in a body which is mortal, but we still, for a very long period of time, until it starts knocking onto us, we think that we are immortal. Yoga, starts to teach you the spiritual dimension also, which is, understanding of yourself, understanding of death. And just once you start to understand yourself as something which is beyond the body, beyond the breath, beyond the mind, it's just a witness which also existed when you were just in the womb, then you will start to not fear, the final ending of your physical body itself, because it's just a transition. But of course, it's easier said than done. It has to be understood really, really deeply. After the understanding of what we call asana, Patanjali talked about the fourth limb, which is pranayama. Pranayama means the expansion of prana. So beyond our physical body, which we address through asana, there is also a pranic body inside us. You can imagine it as an electromagnetic force or a breath body, which can be influenced with, the oxygen that we take in through pranayama. So pranayama just means an expansion of prana. And of course, there are different techniques like, holding the breath inside, holding the breath outside, breathing very fast and rapidly. So that kind of influences the flow of energy inside. Sometimes people say that, if you have, let's say your blood pressure is high, if you start to do pranayam and do anulom vilom, which is slow breathing, holding the breath inside, you are slowly starting to slow the body down. And even you can observe with a little bit of a practice that your blood pressure actually comes down with it. So whatever we do with our body, whatever we do with our breath, has an influence on the mind as well. You would also notice that in the moments when we are quiet, our breath is naturally deeper and longer. So this is what was the fourth limb of yoga, and these first four limbs, as you can see very clearly, deal with the externalities. They deal with what is outside our sphere. Now from here, the next principle comes, or next limb of yoga is called pratyahar. Pratyahar is somehow kind of reversing of the the sense organs of your body, in the sense that if your energy is completely going out through the sense organs, pratyahar is inward gaze, so looking back inside through and that's what is pratyahar. uh, different religions have talked about it. So for example, so next we come to the fifth limb is pratyahar. It links your Bahirang Yoga, which was Yam, Niyam, Asan, and Pranayam, with what is the internal yoga, Dharana, Dhyan, and Samadhi. And Pratyahar is kind of a conversion. It's an intermediate phase where, if you have really started evolving, then the external objects will start interesting you a little less. Your primary interest will become an internal journey than an external journey, and that's what is called, even Christ referred to as that conversion. Conversion was not converting one person from one religion to the other. Conversion had a deeper meaning to it, which meant turning your energy inwards. After that is done, then comes the practice of dharana, dhyan, and samadhi. Dharana is concentration, so that once you're trying to now train your consciousness was very scattered through the interference of your mind. Now you're trying to make it one pointed, and the practice of dharana is actually bringing your concentration into play. So you can do many things with it. For example, looking at a flame, or looking at your own breath. Many techniques of making the mind one pointed is the practice of dharana. But dharana also has a little bit of effort in it. You are making an effort in dharana. From after dharana, the next limb of yoga, which we call dhyan, is a little different from dharana. There, even the effort of doing something drops, and then you are in a contemplation. You are in a what we call meditation, dhyan. There are different techniques again to it. For example, watching your own thoughts, watching your own breath. But there comes a stage when you initially, you always, whenever somebody asks you to meditate, you would always feel that there is a little bit of an effort in the whole process. But in dhyan, you will start to observe that slowly your effort is dropping. You are naturally getting drawn into a state of mind which is very quiet, which is in where your thoughts are slowly evaporating. You are able to see the gaps between different words and images that keep floating inside the mind. So that is where what is the stage when dharana. And then again, as it's not going to happen sequentially, you practice all the limbs, and these limbs are kind of taking you into evolving you towards your final goal, which is called samadhi. So these are the seventh limb, and the eighth limb is samadhi. Samadhi is a state of mind which is which we experience sometimes. Sometimes there is a grave risk to everything. Then our consciousness becomes absolutely still, quiet, or there is some wow moment, and then suddenly your everything stops. The time stops, mind stops. Even the process of thinking stops. So that is the state of mind which is samadhi. We may get a few glimpses of it in different activities that we do. Maybe sometimes we are doing an extreme sport, jumping from an aeroplane, or doing something which brings grave danger or risk or something, and we become absolutely quiet and into a state of samadhi. But when once you have attained it through a practice of yoga itself, like how you can say, when Buddha became enlightened, that is the permanent state of samadhi, or thoughtless state of mind, which we will come to. And that is probably the final potential that we as human beings are supposed to have. They say that it's a journey of many lives that will take us to reach there. But an introduction to yoga would mean that you've already started an awareness about it, even an awareness that this is the final destination that I have. This is the final position or final state of mind that is to be reached, that is to be witnessed. Then then automatically, naturally, our journey into yoga starts. So these are the 8 limbs of yoga. I've mostly talked to people or demonstrated people the hatha, vinyasa, or whatever we do with the body, and sometimes whatever we do with the mind. but I thought, it would be good to bring people to an understanding of what the 8 limbs of yoga are, and so that they could look at it more holistically, and start to understand, different principles involved in it, observe it in their own lives, and with that observation, the awareness will start to flower, and we will be able to achieve the final, destination that we have. Some glimpses of samadhi initially, and maybe, in some lifetime, a final samadhi. So that was more, about what about that was about, all about, the 8 limbs of yoga that I wanted to talk about. Now I would like, if there is to be any discussion on this, people would want to discuss anything through question and answers. We can come to things which we probably, did not even cover in it, and, or which we did not explain very properly. So I would now, if people are ready, I would like to open it to a question and answer session. I can take you back to the things again if you want. So I leave the field open to the participants to, guide this further. Yeah, please.
What I want to ask, you said about Satya, right? Like
Right.
talking truth.
Yeah.
So yeah, talking truth. So it's many times it's automatically that lie comes out of fear or something,
Mhm.
right? I understand it's a practice doing meditation or whatever practices are there. But other than that, and aware, being aware, I get aware too, but I can see it. So automatic it is, like used to. So
Mhm.
anything can be taken so that, and many times feel like it is necessary. If I don't lie,
Mhm.
that some vocabulary is not there at that moment.
No, I agree with you, and that's where, whatever is laid out by Patanjali is not really a principle. It's a result of your own awareness flowering. For example, now, if let's say some patient is dying, and by telling him the truth, you are diminishing the chances of that person,
Yeah.
to survive. Now, would you lie at that moment, or would you, tell him the truth? So maybe at that moment you may tell the lie, which is, beneficial in the larger, benefit. So I think Krishna also used this at times when, he talked about Ashwatthama. Also, so whenever there is a question of a larger good, and if you are doing it with awareness, then Buddha always used to say that, people used to ask him to define what is sin, whether lying or thing. He says, whatever you do with awareness is not a sin. Whatever you do in awareness is a sin. And awareness comes from the activity of the mind and things like that. So in that sense, these yams and niyams are not really principles to follow, but they should be the result of your own awareness, evolving. And you will start to, for example, lying, and you would feel, if you start to observe in our own life, that, by lying, we make it a little more complex. And we do it, as you were saying, without being aware of it. So if our awareness is growing, then the tendency to say an untruth would start to kind of go down.
Because many times it's a subconscious rather than conscious, like
Yeah.
automatic. Yeah. So yeah, got that. Thank
Yeah, I think, because again, you mentioned the word fear, and, because
Yeah, yeah.
we fear because we want a certain outcome of things, or a certain way that event should happen. When you even become choiceless about that result,
Hmm.
that then, you would not have that fear. And when you don't have that fear, then then the lie won't happen. So again,
Yeah.
it's a everything, desire, fear, they are kind of,
Expectation.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, so always it's good to, not look at it as, principle. Sometimes, I would say a principle could become mechanical. For example, now if somebody told me that, making, a blind man cross, a road is, it is the principle. You are helping, so helping is the principle. Now, I may be doing it for various reasons. Now, if I am doing it that I am earning some punya karma out of it, then then it is again greed inside. If I am doing it because it's just a principle, then it is just a mechanical activity. But if I am just standing there, and if there is feeling of a compassion, and it is happening as a result of a compassion, then that is not a principle. So that's where even simple acts of may be very different in what their origin is. And that's where the all the principle of or the concept of awareness actually comes in, because whatever you do with awareness becomes a virtuous action.
Okay, I have a question, Achal.
Yeah.
In today's world, with so much of technology and no time to do asanas, is there something simple steps for all these tech-savvy people, which can be done in 2, 3, 4 minutes or 5 minutes, which will open up their energy channels and enhance the flow of energy within their body? So, because there are so many different asanas, which are the simple ones that you would recommend that you just follow these and it could normalize your energy centers?
Absolutely. So, whenever the energy is blocked, the first point of the block is the joints. So I think the simplest thing to do with asana practice, if you don't have too much time, and you are sitting even in a chair like this. So one is your shoulder joint. So you can just do a few shoulder rotations like this, external rotation of your shoulder joint, and then you can do an internal rotation of your shoulder joint. That will start to open up the shoulder joint. Another thing to do with shoulder joint is simple, what is called Gomukhasana. So we can bring a one hand behind the spine, put it between the shoulder blades, and then you hold it with the other palm. Now there may be times when you may not be able to hold it together. If you're not able to hold it together, you can simply wrap up a hanky or a piece of cloth or anything, and just use that to hold together. If you're not able to get your and holding Gomukhasana, really opens up your shoulder joint. It improves your posture. You can do it with both the sides. So this is something you can do with your shoulder joint. Then with the neck joint, there are simple things. You can just turn the neck to the left. You can turn it to the right. This is one movement of the neck joint. Then another movement is lifting the chin up and dropping the chin to the chest. Other thing you can also, when you're dropping the chin to the chest, it is called a bandha you can do, which is called a Jalandhar bandh. You take a deep breath inside, and then you drop your chin to the chest. It's like a chin lock. So you are keeping the prana vayu in your abdomen area, in your trunk area, and locking it. So this is working not only on the neck joint, but it's also improving it's a kind of a pranayam. It's improving the flow of energy, prana inside inside your lungs. So these movements, this movement, and then the third movement you can do with the neck is just to drop your ear to the shoulder, and then drop it to the other side. This is what you could do with the neck. Now, when you are sitting in the chair, you can also twist. You can simply take your palm behind, hold the back of your chair with the other palm, the base of your chair, and then you twist sideways. It gives you a natural, lever to twist your body. And twisting the spine really releases it. Spine is the most important part of the body in terms of the reflex actions. All our nervous system flows through it. So if you simply just do it, to the sides, it's going to be a real good help. If you have to address your knee joint and your ankle joint, you have to sit, and you can sit either cross-legged, or you can sit in a Vajrasana, which will open up your ankle joint and start to work on your neck joint. Apart from this, in these COVID times, people are starting to, worry about their lungs a lot. So you can always test your lungs by first baselining it. Take a deep breath in, hold the breath inside, the longer you are able to hold, the better it is. If you are able to hold it for 25 seconds, that would mean that your lungs are in a reasonable shape. And if you keep doing it over a period of time, if you have any problem with the lung and you are saying that, okay, last week I was holding it for 25 seconds, but today I'm able to hold it only for 20 seconds or 15 seconds, I'm not able to hold it longer, that means there may be something setting onto your lungs. So it can give you a marker in terms of that there is something going wrong with my lungs. So that's something you can do very easily. Anulom Vilom, another way of influencing your prana, the flow of energy in your body. You just hold two fingers, place them onto the forehead. Two little fingers will block your left nostril. You breathe in from the right one. Take a deep breath in, and don't worry about any counts, because every human being has different sizes of lungs, so we cannot ever standardize counts. Take a deep breath in, fill it to the fullest, and as if you are filling a balloon inside. And then once your lungs have been filled in, you just hold the breath for as long as you can. The longer you hold it, the deeper will be the exchange between the carbon and oxygen in your lung level. And then you will feel more energized with this very simple process. Also, to improve the lung capacity, you can also do the twist by breathing in and holding the twist for a certain time and holding the breath for a certain time. So you twist, take a deep breath in. Now you will see that your lungs inside are twisting. So because of their twisting, and you are also taking at the same time a deep breath, you are helping your lungs to expand. So your capacity of lungs will be a little better by doing the twist and holding it. You can do it to the other side as well. So these are very simple things. Wrist rotation you can do, just sitting on your chair working. You take a little bit of a time, and but I would strongly recommend that for 5 minutes or for 10 minutes during a day, and after every maybe 2-3 hours of sitting on the chair for a long time, you must do these exercises, because they improve the flow of energy in the body. And asana is very popular, and it's but it is really important, because without a healthy body, you will not be able to sharpen your awareness to the extent you can, and that will keep you away from achieving your full potential, or some getting even a glimpse of samadhi. So these are some very, very simple things you can do. If you don't have time, I think even if you do 2 or 3 rounds of sun salutations in a day, I think that's also very, very useful. Some of my yoga students are coming to me and saying that we are interested in doing high intensity interval training. Is there something in yoga which can do that? So I tell them that you do 3 rounds of sun salutation, your heartbeat goes up. You then rest in a child pose for a minute or so. Your heartbeat will come down, and then you can do it again and again for 2-3 times, and that's what is called HIIT, or high intensity interval training. So these are some of the simple things that we can do in our asana practice, even if we are not able to attend.
Sorry, we have lost your audio.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying, that even if we are not able to do a full class, even if we are able to do this 5, 10, 15 minutes of practice of of our joint rotations, working on the breath a little bit, that in itself will give you quite a big benefit. So if you don't have time, please do that, especially in these times. Keep checking how your lungs are working.
Thank you. I have a question. First, thank you very much for giving the holistic view of yoga. I think we have been focusing more on asanas and the physical side of it. And
Right.
gave an excellent overview of all the 8 limbs. I think that's extremely helpful. Now, my query is about the limbs 6 and 7, which is dharana and dhyan, and which probably is the meditation part of it. We normally call meditation.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder, is there any scientific basis for that meditation effect? I mean, the manifestation of the meditation. Some say you can achieve your goal in few years, if you really focus, concentrate, and look for your goal in life, for future life, taking out the thoughts, etc. Can you just give some idea about what is the scientific basis for that? I mean, of course, we heard about quantum energy and physics of it, but even for health, for example, it cures the diabetes or BP for longer period. You don't have to take medicine, these kind of things. So if you can just expand on those area, we would appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes. So I think, for that, we have to look at, what is the state of mind, when you are reaching a state of samadhi, or what is the state of mind of, which is meditative. You would realize that, the structure of the mind is always made of words and images. If you look at it, what is the mind? Mind is not a place inside the body at all. It is an activity. So you cannot say brain and mind are two different things. So if you look at, how the mind gets constructed, it is constructed from words and images. In different combination, you will have words and images coming up, which will, form a sentence inside you, or will form, some kind of, if you really go and look inside, this is what is happening very, very rapidly, so rapidly that we are not even able to understand it. Now, where is it coming from? It is coming from a reservoir of knowledge, memory, experience. It is coming from really what is the past. And life is really what is happening in the moment. So you're looking at your life all the time through a prism of what the past is, your knowledge, your experience. And somehow, this prism of the past does not allow you to look at life, which is happening right in this moment, very clearly. So it is like a dust which is coming from behind, which is stopping you from, looking at life. For example, if you look at another person who is talking to you, and if you always think of that person from, the images of the past, then you would not be able to relate with that person in the moment, because it's always an image which will say, oh, this guy is a useless guy. Now, he may be doing something very useful for you in that very moment, but you, because of all those images, you would not be able to, attend to that with your full intensity. When you have full intensity, then that baggage automatically drops. So dropping that baggage is what a meditative state of mind is. And you would see that you naturally, if whatever interests you, if you're doing something which is very, very interesting, your state of mind becomes more focused. You get to a state which is one-pointed dharana, and sometimes even the, meditative state where even the sense of I, kind of, dissolves. The whole I, again, if you look at it, what is you? What is I? It is just a definition that people have given you. Somebody has said, oh, you are a very nice person. Somebody says, oh, you are you are whatever. All those images, in your mind are forming. It's not a real thing at all. It's just what other people think about you. Sometimes there is a difference. Some two people may, one may think you are very intelligent. The other may think you are not intelligent. And then, it starts to disturb you because you are holding on to one image, but you are not that image. And dissolving that image inside is what meditation, what reaching our full potential is. So if I have to answer your question, if there is a scientific basis to look at it, yes, you can look at it from a basis of, how, if you start studying, how many thoughts do you have. You can also do a simple exercise in the evening. Just sit, with a pen and a paper and say that whatever, word by word, image by image, I will start writing whatever comes into my mind. If you do this simple thing, you will realize that, the moment you will become aware, the mind starts to drop. Your thought processes will stop to, kind of drop. And that is the meditative state of mind that you will, have. So Patanjali, in a way, kind of made it more scientific. He said that if you do this, then you will have samadhi. And that's what the entire journey is all about. If we are able to, do, all the formulas that he has told us in Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, if we are able to really follow them very clearly, we will be able to attain samadhi. But then who is that we? Because there will be no I remaining then. So it is also in a way very paradoxical that I will achieve samadhi, but then at that state there is no I, and there is no sense of achievement, or there is no sense of, it's just a sense of liberation, because the whole burden of I has kind of, broken.
Thank you. Yeah.
We have a couple of minutes more.
Yeah.
If there are any further questions,
Yeah,
Achal,
please.
take up.
Feel free to. Yeah, we have 6-7 minutes more. I can.
Feel free to.
Yeah. Are there any more questions?
I don't think.
Binaji, is there anything that you would want me to address?
I think Beena ji is there, but I'm not sure whether she's
able
available
to.
right now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, if there are no further questions, it is my very pleasant duty to profusely thank Achal Mehraji for this wonderful talk on the introduction to the 8 limbs of yoga. It's only he has not even touched the tip of the iceberg. It was just to give us a flavor of the 8 aspects or 8 dimensions, or as Patanjali calls it, the 8 limbs of yoga. And as we know, of all the 6 systems of Indian philosophy, yoga is the most popular and most practical philosophy, because it has it not only has a philosophy, but it also has a very practical application which we see, and that's why it has become so popular. And it is helping everybody in some respect or the other.
Right.
Achalji said even 5 minutes of some small practices could lead to a great change in our life.
Right.
What have been stuck for several people, I have actually seen it. Somebody have been suffering from, say, spondylitis or knee joint pains or frozen shoulders. A few of the asanas, a few of the small exercises could give a lot of relief. And that's a very practical way, because Patanjali himself says the best thing about asanas is, if you are able to do them properly, you will forget the presence of your body.
Exactly. That's what the meaning of that.
Yeah.
Sthir Sukham Asanam. When he defines asana, he says Sthir Sukham Asanam. What is comfort giving and what is steady is a posture. So you don't really need to, if somebody does a posture which is very complicated, but he's not feeling comfortable in it, then that's not a posture at all. So you could be sitting in your chair, you could be feeling very comfortable with it. It's also a posture.
It's like becoming a child. The child is oblivious of its own body. Absolutely. It runs here and there and does everything. We're absolutely happy. So that's the state of body. And then the dimensions of our mind and emotions and feelings, all of them come out, and we can tackle them. You need to carefully go through these processes of yama and niyama. And I really like what Achalji said, that it's not so much of a principle, but more of awareness. If you're talking about a principle, you may start doing it mechanically.
Exactly.
That's what he has brought to our notice. It's more a question of being in a state of awareness constantly. Right. The more attentive, the more aware you are about your actions, your thoughts, your words, your feelings, the truth will reveal itself to us.
Absolutely.
That's something wonderful. That's a good takeaway for all of us, to increase our levels of awareness. And I profusely thank Achal Mehraji for this wonderful introduction and bringing out some important dimensions of the very practice and the practical application of yoga And it's not only about asana and pranayama, but all the other dimensions also need to be focused on. And I think that purpose has been very well served by today's talk. And I am very happy for all the participants. And on behalf of the participants also, I would like to thank Achal Mehra ji. And Ritambhara Wellness takes pride in these sessions being conducted. And Achal Mehra ji had come earlier also. He had addressed our participants earlier also, and we would expect more and more participation from both the audience today and Achal Mehra ji, who is quite open and willing to help us. Because the most important part about yoga is practice. It's not about the philosophy, it's not about the wisdom that is there and all that. Once you start doing something, you start opening up a totally new dimension in our own self. Our own self, there's a new dimension which we have not discovered. So we will be on a journey of discovery. And for introducing us to the 8 limbs of Ashtanga Yoga, I once again thank Achal Mehra ji on behalf of Ritambhara Wellness and all the participants here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Achal ji. Before we close, a couple of announcements. Please join us for our upcoming programs. On Friday, 9th July, we will be doing a session on emotional freedom technique. And on Friday, 16th July, a session on music and creativity with the lead guitarist from a well-known indie brand. The program details will be posted on a WhatsApp group. At Ritambhara, we look forward to your presence on Select Fridays, where we bring to you interesting topics on holistic wellness and the arts delivered by a host of distinguished and knowledgeable speakers. Thank you once again to everyone.